And with those formalities completed, I'll look to who would like to speak first. I believe it's Rod Giltaca, appearing virtually.
Good afternoon, Mr. Giltaca. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon.
Commissioner McDonald here. Yes, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to my part of this this submission is just to make a few salient points from our report. So as mentioned, the NFA and the CCFR were put together as a coalition. Our organizations are similar in some ways and dissimilar in others. So what we decided to do was to break our report into two sections, first being the CCFR's opinion of events and answers to the questions that the commission had asked of us, and then the second part for the NFA. So I'm going to comment on my part of the report. So I would encourage everyone that has access to the report to read it. Certainly the CCFR portion is very, very short. It's only about 6 pages. It's very concise and it's very logical. So the commission, I guess in the beginning, asked us some questions, to address some questions. And if I were to paraphrase them, they would be, where and how did the perpetrator get his firearms? What were any regulatory failings in Canada's firearm controls regime? And do we have any suggestions on how to improve that regulation in order to mitigate or prevent events like this in the future? So I thought, in my time, I would use my time to highlight a couple of important points, and really there's 2 important points. Number one, all but one of the perpetrator's firearms were illegally obtained in the United States and, of course, illegally smuggled into Canada. The one firearm that he had in his possession, this is all based on the firearm foundational document. The one domestically sourced firearm that he had was obtained through fraud. And I did not see any evidence presented in the foundational document that indicated that he used that firearm against anyone during his rampage. Next point, which is really important, is this individual was not licensed to own firearms in Canada. The perpetrator took one step towards the licensing process by taking the Canadian Firearm Safety Course. Anyone can, it's just a safety course, there's no vetting, anyone can take that course. But I can only suppose that when he was confronted with the application process, he decided that it would be far easier for him and more advantageous for any future activities that he just sidestep the entire regulatory regime all at once by not even participating in the licensing system. Now, what's important to understand, I think, or at least to consider, is that in our system, our enforcement and justice system operates on the idea of deterrence, you know, a moral or otherwise psychological deterrence. So if I were to behave badly in society, you know, be guilty of some criminal activity, there is a chance that I could be arrested. There's a chance that I could be charged with an offense. There's a chance that I could be convicted, or there's a chance that I could face some kind of punishment. If in regular criminal activity, most criminals do the math. They look at they do the numbers. They look at what are the chances that I'm going to get caught for this activity because I don't have a problem morally with this activity. And typically that's how you see criminals behave. In the situations like this, it's a complete abandon of the idea of deterrence. This individual did not care whatsoever what the consequences or the process there was. And that renders our infrastructure, billions upon billions of dollars and tens of thousands of people involved in that infrastructure, that enforcement and justice infrastructure, renders it irrelevant. And a person like this ends up in a new realm. It's a physical realm. The only way to stop someone like this is through a physical intervention. And in fact, we see this, well, virtually in every single event that fits this type of profile. And we saw it in this event where the perpetrator was eventually, once the police were able to catch up with him and identify him, he was neutralized and it was over. So that's something I think that is really important not to be lost in this endless discussion that we're having about this this situation. It's really, really important that we realize this. So I guess all that to say that if you understand the reality of these types of events, and then you try to compare the regulatory system with them, firearm registration, magazine size capacity limits, licensing, possession offenses, not just firearm offenses, but any offense whatsoever, they're all rendered irrelevant in the face of someone who does not acknowledge that system, does not participate in it, sidesteps the whole thing. And to give you an example, we saw that in the Toronto van attack. An individual with a driver's license and $80 rented a van, and he was able to kill 11 people and injure, including critically injure 15 more in 10 minutes. So when someone steps outside of our system and decides it's meaningless, there's no intervention that is meaningful other than a physical intervention. And so I think that's something that people need to consider, or at least keep top of mind when we talk about regulatory reform. So in all practical matters, the most extreme regulatory reform would be a ban on all firearms. So understanding the fact pattern in this case in particular, there could have been a total ban on firearms for 50 years preceding this incident, and it wouldn't have changed this incident at all. Firearms came from outside the country, and you had a person who didn't participate in the system whatsoever. So it's just, as we move forward and talk about regulatory reforms, it's really important that we think about this. Now, as far as any question about how this individual was able to do so much damage in such a short time, I looked at it. I spent a lot of time thinking about this very carefully, and from a lot of different angles. And I think the unavoidable reality is that his ability to do so much damage came from the fact that he was impersonating a police officer. He was able to move around the community for an extended period of time, evade police. In fact, the most damaging part of it probably was the trust that the public perceives in the uniform of a police officer. So metaphorically speaking, people would see a man with a gun in their hands and run towards that person instead of running away from them. So it's, and I don't think it can be understated, the impact of that, because it even caused so much confusion that we had police officers opening fire on each other. And I'm not going to make any comment on that because it's outside my purview, only to say that that's the level of impact it had. So, at the end of the day, our report really highlighted the fact that although we can talk about regulatory changes, we can talk about modifying behavior, but when someone, and this is why these types of situations are so unique, when someone steps outside the system entirely, there's really nothing to make a serious difference, certainly not an all-out ban on guns. And I'll close with one more remark. Because of the physical reality, not the supposed reality, not any type of spitballing about regulation, the physical reality, if there was a gun ban in Canada for the last 50 years, it actually would have put the public even more at risk. And I would just draw your attention to our report and just 2 paragraphs. I'm not going to read them, obviously. You can see the report if you're interested, but 2 paragraphs that involved the situation with Adam and Carol Fisher. So if you can imagine, there's a total gun ban in Canada. It actually would have made a negative difference maybe in that situation. I'm just supposing that. We don't have all the evidence that we need to confirm that. In any case, as I said, thank you for the opportunity to make the submission and discuss our report. I'm going to pass the rest of my time over to Robert Bracken of the NFA.
Thank you, Mr. Giltaca. Commissioner Stanton has a question for you.
Hi, just when you say the commission asked you to answer those questions, do you mean in conversation with our staff when you became a participant in the proceedings?
I guess I'd say that, yeah, these were
Okay.
potential questions for our involvement.
Thanks. And then when you talk about your report, you're referring to the submissions that you have made that were sent in. Is that right? The submissions that you're referencing?
That's correct. Half of
Okay.
it was done for the CCFR and half from the NFA.
I see. Okay, yeah, because there were the other 2 reports, so I just wanted to make sure that I understood which document you were referring to. That's helpful. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you again, Mr. Giltaca, for for your presentation today.